Well, just in the last few weeks, Sean, we have seen major media outlets like the New York Times come under scrutiny as opinion editors like Bari Weiss, who we talked about in depth, have resigned due to the toxic work environment and biased reporting. And just this week, another one, an MSNBC producer, resigned from the network with a scathing letter saying that the network blocks diversity of thought and they amplify fringe voices. So another woman has resigned because she dares to tell both sides of the story, or desires to tell both sides of the story. This is extremely concerning. Let's bring in our company. Joining us today is Democratic strategist Jessica DeLoach and the Trump campaign senior legal advisor Jenna Ellis. Ladies, welcome back.
Thanks so much.
All right. Well, I want to read part of this letter. Ariana Peccary, this MSNBC producer, goes on. I mean, some of the stuff that she says in her letter, I can almost barely believe. But she accuses the network of becoming a cancer that blocks diversity of thought and amplifies fringe voices. And she says the model blocks diversity of thought and content because the networks have an incentive to amplify fringe voices and events at the expense of others, all because they want to pump up ratings. Honestly, it's not that big of a shock, but it's sad to know that we're seeing this time and time again. And she said this is a cancer that she doesn't know can be cured, but she really hopes to see diversity of thought because she thinks that's what people truly want. We saw this with Bari Weiss, Jessica, and time and time again, we're seeing this. She calls the network that they're actually rotten. So, I mean, what is the cure? Is there a cure?
So I love this topic, and I think that this is a long overdue conversation. You know what? I don't think that you can go to work for a media entity that solely exists on one side of the political spectrum or the other and not run into this issue. I mean, I appreciate all of these women for making this decision for themselves to live their truth. But what happens on MSNBC, these same grievances could be thrown over to Fox. And it's unfortunate because these entities have massive reach into so many people's homes. And we're having this happen at a time when local news coverage is on the decline. So people are turning to these sources based on what they want to know. And then they're taking all that analysis as fact. And it's toxic. And it happens every day, all day long.
The thing that I think, I think the thing that's interesting about your point, Jessica, is that in each one of these cases, Lindsay and I were talking about this before the show. In each one of these cases, it's not like the conservative at the New York Times said, I can't work here anymore, or the conservative at MSNBC. Both of these women are avowed liberals. They're basically saying it's so crazy that even I can't be here. And I think the other point that's interesting is that both of these places claim to want it, but yet don't do it. So it's one thing if you're, a conservative media outlet or a liberal media outlet, if you're the Daily Beast or HuffPost and someone says, then that's their goal. They want to be left wing. But when you preach about inclusivity and tolerance and your own people that are on the same side as you don't see it, I think that's the problem. So it's not like the right's arguing with the left. I know MSNBC's tilt. I know the New York Times tilt. But it's people within saying, you guys can't keep preaching to us that you want a workplace that's intolerant and inclusive and then not deliver us for us who are on your side. Is that not fair, Jenna?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'll actually agree with Jessica, which it's a remarkable day when conservatives and, Republicans and Democrats can actually agree on something. But I think that the main salient point here is for all of us who have been in media, we understand the difference between reporting facts and having opinion. And that line has been so blurred by all of the mainstream media outlets. And I agree with Jessica, it's across the board. It's not just MSNBC, it's also Fox News, it's all of the mainstream media networks because their goal is revenue. Their goal actually is entertainment and activism. And that's something that it is a long overdue conversation because the people who are turning to these sources for their news content, not just opinion, are being shaped in the story and what's being reported by the culling of the news and these outlets deciding for them what is important to report and, more importantly, what's important not to. And that's why President Trump has turned to some of the alternative media sources and saying, let's amplify the genuine reporters and let's amplify the message that isn't getting out, the stories that aren't getting out. And hopefully these mainstream media activists will take note and will say, we actually care about a journalistic ethic rather than just going to the revenue as corporations. And they will go back to the source of what actually makes people tune in, because I think a lot of people are tuning out, especially with the popularity and the amplification of social media, that we can now get all of the information readily available. We don't have to just turn to mainstream media.
But I think one of the concerns, too, is a lot of people don't always know what's true and what's not true. And one thing that she points out is that a lot of times they choose what to talk about when it comes to COVID. And they talk more about the president's comments based on instead of the science behind it. Same with Black Lives Matter. And Jessica, you make a great point that we are seeing local TV kind of go by the wayside a little bit. And so people really are looking to these big outlets to give them information. And, you know, Bari Weiss said this back when she resigned, that Twitter is now the editor of the New York Times. And we see this mob rule to make these decisions. And that's what Peccary is essentially saying. It's all about the people. And you're saying that too, Jenna. But I think we have to go back to it is the responsibility of these journalists to tell both sides of the story, and we're not getting that here. So you have a good point, Jessica, that people do work at places because they're left or right leaning, but Sean has a great point too. Both the ladies are liberals, and Bari Weiss even talks about that. So I think my hope is that this raises attention to viewers to know that, one, there is bias, and two, that there should be pressure to move the needle back to the center.
Yeah, one thing that I would really like to emphasize here is that so much of this comes down to media literacy. And if you look at most polling about what Americans consider to be your more middle of the road, unbiased material, you'll see CBS, ABC, those types of entities appear, which is really great because that is true. Now, it is very difficult to have an entity where editorial content is allowed alongside just straight up reporting, because ultimately with those lines running against each other, they're going to be blurred and people are going to get confused. And people generally don't like to put themselves outside of their comfort zones. They want to hear what makes them comfortable. It's really hard to detach yourself from your own political views to educate yourself about what people on the other side may be thinking and how they see the world. It's one of the biggest challenges of our time. So I really love that we're having this conversation.
All right, we'll have to continue this because there's a lot to talk about here. And, you know, people do want to be comfortable, but we do need to put the facts in front of them because oftentimes they are very uncomfortable. Thank you, ladies. Look forward to having you back.
This is why we need more debates between...
We're out of time, Jenna. We got to have you back because this is a great conversation.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Senate Republicans are conflicted about what to do if a Supreme Court seat becomes vacant during the remainder of the President Trump's first term. We'll talk about what that might look like and how the GOP will approach the issue next.